שערי ציון is much more than a synagogue. It is the engine of this community.
שערי ציון has been my home since I was a young boy.
שערי ציון represents as it being the golden goose of the community. It's where everything happens.
Shaare is the heart of the community. Shaare was the start of the community.
For me, Shaare is my upbringing.
My father, Abe Cohen, alav shalom, said it's the place from which everything grew. It's our central point, and it still serves as the central heartbeat point of our community.
Every time people walked into שערי ציון, they knew they were in the foundation of our community.
It's a cornerstone of religious life in the community, without a doubt.
Shaare is a place that all the community members in our Syrian Sephardic community here in Brooklyn know is their real home.
שערי ציון represents to me a place to be as a community.
שערי ציון is the best. No any issue like שערי ציון.
שערי ציון is our Beit HaMikdash.
There was no synagogue, SY synagogue, from Brighton Beach to Church Avenue. None. Zero. The need was unbelievable, the need. So we opened up before Rosh Hashanah. The place was a show place. You cannot believe it. I had to hire 10 security guards.
We saw ladders, and they were installing the chandelier. And I was like very impressed with the whole building.
Abbat Shalom, my daughter Stephanie, used to love to dress and come to shul during the holidays. And I had an opportunity to dedicate the balcony to my daughter. So it is called the Stephanie Jamal Sultan balcony.
In the early 1990s, the inherent community that had been here had been growing dramatically, thank God. And we were blessed with our families being reunited from Syria. And here, שערי ציon, as the mother congregation, my father felt very strongly that this was the place for everyone, and we had to accommodate the additional space needed. So I'll never forget, there was a Shabbat morning when I sat here in the third row, and my father announced that there would be a 50% expansion in the size of the building. I'll never forget the ruckus in the room and the pushback in the room. I'll never forget it, and the lack of consensus to do so. 4 years later, my father was almost 80 at the time. He and Salah Ashkenazi, who was about 70, completed the expansion of the building to grow it almost 50% larger than it had been. So the first project was during the 50s, the second project was the late 80s, early 90s, and he had the strength and the stamina. And at 95 years old, 10, 12 years later, he was walking around with the plans to expand it further. In the 90s, the building next door was bought as well, which we ended up dedicating in my father, Abe Cohen, and my mother, Jerry Cohen, alav shalom's honor. It served as a building with tremendous amount of Torah learning. We learned in there for a while, the young שערי ציון, B'nai שערי ציon boys. Since then, it's been a vibrant annex to our fabulous building here.
In 1994, the building was getting a renovation. And I said, Rabbi, we have all these rooms back here. What should I do with them? He says, you start a Torah center. I want you to be involved. I want you to take care of it. I don't want to hear another word about it.
Many years ago, we went there. I started coming to shul every morning when my father passed away, saying Kaddish. And I started to learn. We went downstairs in the basement. There were only 3 tables at the time. Today, we have over 100 people every night. We had Baruch on one table, Yom Gindi on one table, Ronnie Rafu was teaching me at the time, and some of my friends all together. It was very inspiring, but it really grew so much when Rab Meir came into the picture. His influence was tremendous in the growth of our Torah. I think it was about 20-something years ago that I was on the committee for a while, and David Sutton approached me and said, "Would you like to be president?" And I was shocked, taken aback, and humbled by it. I couldn't believe it, but I said, "David, if you feel I can do it, I will try my best." And the rest is history, so to speak. I've been doing it for many years.
When we think about the people who brought this community to where it is today, so of course we think about our gratitude for all those men and women who sacrificed so much that we can have what we have today. We are the recipients of all the dedication.
Shalom was first the pillar of this community, perhaps the very foundation of this community in so many ways. I remember him, at one time I worked for Shalom and Company in the summers. They used to give jobs to young boys for summer work, and I was one of the beneficiaries of doing that. He had a quiet presence, and he just instilled awe in everybody that saw him.
The leadership I got actually from watching Abe Cohen and Dave Cohen for so many years was a tremendous inspiration for me. I was able to watch and learn from their ways, the way they were able to handle various situations in the shul. I got to learn from especially Abe Cohen. He was a real diplomat and a big inspiration to me.
My father spoke about many meetings with people to bring them along, to ask for their support, to ask for their loans, to ask for their donations. He was here on average every day till 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. When we were growing up, he used to come home from work very late because he didn't get to the city till 1, 2 o'clock because he was here all day. But this was his passion. This was his greatest love. Nothing made him happier.
My father, Bert Dweck, Afai Shalom, the Sharet ציון building was in his heart, and he was very instrumental of making this building. It was supposed to be a square building. For many years they were planning the plans. So Sam Catton told me they were sitting in a room, and Bert Dweck got up in front of Shalom and said, "Mr. Shalom, this looks like a warehouse. We have to change this design." My father was very well in tune with architecture. He was a visionary, and he said, "Bert, if you could think you could make it better, you handle it." So my father said, "Okay, we'll make it better. I'll handle it." He hired Morris Lapidus, one of the most famous designers that designed the Fountain Blue. And he was a friend of his. He called him up. He got him to do it at an unbelievable cost for the shul. And today they changed. My father's idea was to make this a dome around so everybody has a good seat in the kahal and nobody felt left out. So anybody, wherever you sat in this synagogue, you have a good seat.
Some of the other leaders that were very impressive to me one of them was Ralph Towell in particular. It was, his charity was unlimited, and he would teach people how to just give. And don't worry about how you're going to pay the bill. Just give, don't worry. That was his motto. It'll come to you. And he was very inspired. Today we have new people doing it, Eli Cohen, many other people in the community that are so charitable to this synagogue, and it means so much to them, and we're still carrying it. Harry, Ajmi, they don't stop. They just keep giving and giving to this synagogue because they love it here. It's part of them. It's instilled in them.
The topic comes up of my father-in-law, Joe Esses, alav shalom. I think when we think about him, we have to look back to his father, Abraham Asses. From what I understand, he instilled in all his children a tremendous sense of community dedication, community service. It became second nature to that family. And my father-in-law certainly got it, and also his brothers. Each one of the brothers was active in community affairs. No matter what the organization was, it be the yeshiva, the synagogue, they were just instilled in community service. My father-in-law, Joe Esses, was a quiet man, but a very powerful presence. He was a person that got a lot done. He had vision, he had dedication, he had drive. He was a reluctant leader in some cases. He was serving on the committee at Sharet ציון. He instilled in me the importance of Sharet ציון from a committee perspective. In fact, I think a wonderful tribute to Joe Esses and his wife Celia, that Eddie, my brother-in-law, was privileged, and his wife Sarah, privileged to dedicate the dome in the Mermi, and it's a wonderful thing to go into the building, to go into the dome and see the dedication at the entrance of the dome as well as on the outside. I think it's a fitting tribute to somebody who really gave his life to the community and very directly to שערי ציון as well. It's a wonderful tribute and really an act of generosity on the part of my brother-in-law Eddie and his wife Sarah.
My father was an extremely dynamic man. He had a great personality, and his voice carried very, very far. And he was a show. It was a show to listen to him auction. And they loved listening to him, and people loved bidding because they were part of the process. And I remember as a kid going to shul, and people used to whisper, Norman Jamal's going to go speak. Norman Jamal's going to go auction. Let's go listen. Let's go listen. So instead of people running out of the synagogue during the time my father auctioneered, they'd run into the synagogue so they could listen to him.
My father, Joseph Sultan, was president about 25 years ago. And his father, Judah Sultan, along with his brother Abe Sultan, were on the building committee. It was saying over 80 years ago. That's a true honor for us, for my family, that they were so involved for generations. Furthermore, for my family, the Sultan family, we've been honored with the courtesy of opening the Ne'ilah Ark during Yom Kippur every day for generations, 80 years now.
My father, Sam Canton, for a while was on the board of directors of שערי ציון. He did like to teach the youngsters. So we used to have on Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, and sometimes during the year, he ran a youth minyan. Teenagers and younger ones and everything who couldn't fit in this shul anymore. And we had it downstairs in the terrace room, and we had, he used to bring down a lot of the Hazanim. They didn't want to go down. Just let the kids, he said, no, I want you to come down. And when my father, Sam Catton, told some Hazan come down, they came down because that's how much they respected him. And that's where we grew up. That's where I learned to be a Hazan. There were used maybe 7 or 8 different mahzurim being used in the shul. And all of them were a little different. And that bothered my father because his whole aim with the Sephardic Heritage Foundation, which he established a couple of years before that, was to perpetuate our prayers and customs and pizmonim, to keep the Syrian tradition that we all learned from our parents and grandparents that came from Syria, to keep it alive in America. It worked on it for maybe 3-4 years. So the first day of Kippur, I remember, 1971, was the first year that those books came out. And we got up to say the Vidui on Kippur, and he looked around, he said, Harry, Eddie, look all over, look here, look there. Everybody is using the same book, and look, everybody is saying Vidui, which they never used to do. And his tears were streaming down, and he was so happy and proud. I never forget that.
My father, Stanley Chira, alav shalom, was a key part of not just my growth, my family's growth, but I also believe this community's growth and success. The midot that he embodied and taught us all and taught his friends was really simply magnetic, and his tolerance was simply amazing. And it wasn't just something that was brought upon him, it was something that was brought from his grandfather and his father, and also his friends, neighbors, and the rabbis that were surrounding our community at this time.
When I think about the expansion of שערי ציון, specifically the social hall as it is today, and the Bnei שערי ציון synagogue as it stands today, and that whole back area, I think a lot about my father-in-law. And of course, Abe Cohen, who was his right-hand man. They were partners in the initiative, the two heads. For many years, they were in a dilemma. Should we do it? Can we do it? How much? Who's going to do it? We can't do it. We could do it. So my father-in-law was a very, very talented man in many ways. Specifically pertaining to this subject, he was a unofficial, tremendous architect. He was also very, very, very community-minded, as everybody knows. Abe Cohen at the time, who was president of the shul, approached my father-in-law and asked them to please take on the project, even though my father-in-law lived in Deal full-time. But of course, my father-in-law considered the community, whether it's Deal, Florida, Brooklyn, the city, doesn't matter, we're all one. And he got it done. He got it done. It wasn't easy, but my father-in-law, Saul Ashkenazi, once he put his mind to something, he made it happen and stuck with it until he was able to finish the job. And as you can see now, it's a blessing.
My father, Gabriel Shehebar, Alav Shalom, we had a small, maybe 20 people in Bay Parkway in a house behind the Magen David Shul on 67th Street when we first came. And then when we moved to Ocean Parkway, he would go to Shari Sion, him and a crew of about 20 people, Egyptians. Some of his brothers, some of my uncles on my mother's side, Marcel, and that's the way it was. Ahava was a shul and a yeshiva in Cairo, Egypt. So we wanted to open an Ahava here. And we found a lot on Avenue R, and we decided to build the shul. And it was, we didn't have any money, and we had to collect money to open the shul. We finally did. And we had the help of a lot of the people from Shari Sion to help us build the shul. And we finally built it, I think, in 1975. So Ahava considers Shari Sion the mother congregation, of course. And they love the Shari Sion community, and we feel very attached to it. And so they to us.
Social has the name of my parents, and it was very funny how it happened. It seems somebody on the committee spoke to Edmund Saffer and wanted $1 million donation for something, and it seems he wouldn't give it. And finally they said, okay, we'll give you the social hall with it. So I guess they gave him a 2-for-1 or whatever it was, and he says, okay, if you're going to give me the social hall with it, please give it in honor of my friend Joe Carey, and he'll tell you who he wants to dedicate it to. And that's how that came about.
We devised the idea of selling lifetime seats. We never sold lifetime seats in the community ever. Had a general meeting, and finally I went to Hacham. I told him the trouble we're having, with the seating. Because no, we never did it. It's no haram, no maybe you can't do it. I went to him. He says, you can do it on condition to find anybody who lost his money in business in the past 10 years and quietly give him a seat for nothing.
My father was very close with Hacham Matlub. He was his top student, and they had classes with him all the time. Now, Hacham Matlub used to shun the spotlight. Everybody used to push him to go up and sit on the pulpit. He refused. He used to sit in the back row over there amongst the people. He used to say, my father and others tried to get him, Hacham, go sit up there with Rabbi Kassin and Rabbi Hecht. He said, no. Betoch ami ani yoshev. There's a saying in the Bible somewhere, I'm not sure where. I sit amongst my people. That's where I want to be. I shun the kabod. I don't want to sit up there. He was very well learned. In fact, he came from Israel. There was talk that they wanted him to be the chief rabbi in Israel, but they wanted to bring him back from America, but he says, I could do more. You have a lot of good rabbis in Israel. You don't need me. I could do more for the Jewish people and for religion and Torah in America than I could do in Israel. So he stayed here. He wrote many books. Magen Ba'adi. Ba'adi is Habadi. Halakha books. He gave a lot of Pesach Din. Like I said, when anybody had halakha questions, they'd go to him. What he said was law.
When I started here, I remember the first time I saw Hacham Yaakov Katzin Alav Shalom. He's the big tzaddik, big Mekubal. And I saw him the first time, I feel, wow, wow.
My grandfather was very, very focused on the youth, on the young adults, from a marriage standpoint, from a socializing standpoint, and obviously from a Torah study and religious observance. Considered himself the father of the community. I remember he told me verbatim that every person in the community are his children. And it makes sense to me because the way he led the community, the way he guided the community, the way he protected the community, it really was like a father image. And very importantly, the way he had patience, he had tolerance, he didn't disengage with anyone, he never looked down on anyone, regardless of their observance of the holidays and religion or their learned level or anything like that.
Rabbi Jacob Kassan, alav hashalom, zecher tzaddik v'bracha, they understood that this was a rabbi that could lead the community. And building a building is one thing, filling it up is another.
Rabbi Hecht was a tremendous force in the community, a great communicator, a rabbinic scholar, and he had a lot of influence on people. And because he had this very good, close relationship with my grandfather, I think it helped him and the community to be able to understand certain things that Rabbi Hecht brought to the table every Shabbat with his beautiful sermons that we used to wait for. And he was always very, very articulate, very to the point, and you really left the shul going home knowing what the important message was. So that was a very important part, and I feel the key thing is that the mutual respect that they had for each other and the way they cared for the community and conducted themselves together.
Back then, Rabbi Hecht would have all of the dignitaries, whether they were from the police commissioner, whether the mayors at the time, they would all come, and this would be their stop to share Zion.
When I had my bar mitzvah, you would go up and you'd make a speech in Hebrew and English. Afterwards, Rabbi Hecht used to would come out and give you a chumash, a Cincino chumash, and it was like $1 million for a kid getting that on his bar mitzvah day.
Rabbi Hecht was a very close friend of mine, a very brilliant man. He really knew how to speak and to hit the youth and as well as the adults of our community. He was probably one of the best speakers that Sher Tzion ever had.
My father, Chacham Baruch alav hashalom, came from Israel in the beginning of 1950. He came originally to be the assistant to our chief rabbi, Rabbi Jacob Kassan, who was my grandfather. Eventually, my father really came here as a single man and eventually married the daughter of the chief rabbi. It didn't even take that long. He came in the beginning of 1950. By May 14th of 1950, they were actually married already. He started in Bensonhurst, 67th Street, where I was born. And then in the early 60s, we moved to Flatbush. We came to Sha'ari ציון.
Rabbis like Chacham Baruch to follow with Rabbi Jacob Kassan was, in my opinion, the major event that catapulted this shul to another level. It established the shul as the mother congregation of the community. It allowed this shul to have tremendous growth with bringing the congregation to the synagogue. The rabbi was also very strong in his beliefs of what the community needed. And when he set his mind on something, it was really amazing to watch it all come to fruition. He started the Torah Center that exists today, and I'm sure in Shamayim he is smiling because you could see the hundreds of young, middle-aged, and elders learning
on a constant basis in this shul?
During my tenure as president, I would be in Khan Baruch's house practically every other week, going over issues, getting advice from him. Whenever there was a machloket, I would go to him. He would handle it. He'd tell me, Ike, this is what I want you to do. It was done. Nobody questioned him. This is the way it happened, and it just worked very nicely for me over the years.
Rabbi Jacob's Kassen's son, Shaul, was also a giant of our community, and we've lost him a few years back. But I'm sure we have so many young rabbis who are learning from what they learned from these rabbis.
Well, my father was, Hashem was his life. So he was going to shul every day, rain, snow, even when there's an ice storm. I went to pick him up. I didn't want him to drive. I had to go step by step because it was a sheet of ice. So when I went there that day, he's coming out, running out of the house to come to the shul, running. Me, I have to hold on. And he's probably 90. He's holding like this. I'm holding on like this, he's running down the stairs. So he tells me, I said, Dad, what are you doing? He goes, I'm connected from the heavens. I don't fall. And I thought it was like just, he's joking with me. But in hindsight, it was true. I could not walk like that. He was 90, he's walking, he's connected from the heavens. And we, the community, all benefited from his connection to Hashem. That's the bottom line.
Hacham Yuntov, may he rest in peace. He was the chief rabbi in Halab. And in his time over there, he put all the community together, and he managed the whole community with a very strong fist and put everybody in religion. And when he came here to United States, it was a very pleasant thing to see our rabbi, chief rabbi in Halab, coming in here. And he did continue on his pace of teaching and learning with all the community in America, and he taught a lot of students as well in America.
My father, alav shalom, left Halab and came here and continued what he was doing, continued learning, continued teaching.
Rabbi Yedid, he had also one of his son-in-laws, is Rabbi Leon Gindi. He is related to me, and Rabbi Leon Gindi is great. He doing tremendous teaching in the shul, and his students are excellent students, and they are very well known in the community as well, probably all over the world. So God bless him and keep him on the good pace of the good education and religion.
Rabbi Rafael El-Nadav, who was a professional of professionals, and he used to pray every Shabbat and on the holidays. And he really put this place on the map. He came from Turkey and Israel, and he knew the Slah and the Ma'amat and the prayers beautifully, and his voice was spectacular.
I am on the way to go to pray in Yamim Noraim in Mexico. And Edward Fahi came to me. He told me, please, bechavod, pray Musaf. I'm talking about the Shabbat morning. So Nahari pray Shachrit, and I pray Musaf. And this is the first time I meet Edward Fahi. And it's the best guy. I wish everybody work with some partner so nice, so Hacham, so Adin Nefesh.
In honor for me to be a Hazan Sha'ari ציון, more than 42 years, sharing all tefillot and smahot with Hacham Yaakov Kassin, Hacham Baruch Ben Hayim, and Rabbi Hecht, Abraham Hecht, and Hacham Shaul Kassin.
The Gemara tells us, Tzadikim b'mitatan keruim hayim. the tzaddikim see from up above what's going on. No question if my father was here, but we believe that even from the Shamayim, my father is smiling, sees the growth of the congregation.
You see sometimes in institutions what was 40, 50, 60 years ago, it's pretty hard, if not impossible to maintain. Let alone we've maintained it, it's only getting stronger.
And we needed the synagogue to continue being what שערי ציון was, the way our fathers and grandfathers envisioned it to be. And next thing you know, Rabbi Meir comes along. Rabbi Meir joins the שערי ציon family. He does a wonderful job of building up this Torah center. I don't think there's a Torah center anywhere in America, maybe not even in Eretz Yisrael, I'm sorry to say that. But this Torah center here is thriving, and it was all under the Cham Baruch first started it, but Rabbi Meir Yedid took it to another level.
I consider it to be one of the best groups of rabbis to give and continue to perpetuate the teachings of our great rabbis of the past. Today, thank Hashem that the community has grown and flourished in different ways, where the shul still represents a tremendous part of everybody's life.
A generation developed of people who loved Torah, who loved Gemilut Chasadim, who loved the synagogue, and most of us are still here, and thankfully so.
The space, as time went on, years later, it started filling up more and more and more. And at the point of today, you can't even walk into a room without having a packed room. Every single nook and cranny of the synagogue, of wherever you walk, there's a packed room, not enough space, and it's just unbelievable.
It's probably one of the most successful things about שערי ציון. It keeps growing to meet the needs of the community. As the needs grow, the synagogue grows, and sometimes even anticipates the growth. It's an amazing, amazing synagogue, amazing service to this community, and it's at the forefront of so many other synagogues as well. I think it was the first Torah center in the community, and many other initiatives that were started at שערי ציון became adopted by other synagogues as well. So it's a hallmark, it's an anchor of the community.
Everything is done here in Shem Shamayim, and that's why this building will continue for another 80 years, inshallah, and beyond. There's no secret, and we should learn and teach the other communities around the world to continue to grow and build this network of Judaism and Sephardic midot around the world.
I think everybody should realize that this legacy wall that we're building today is of paramount need. If we didn't need it, if it wasn't critically important financially to us, we wouldn't do it. This is not that kind of institution, Sharzai. We're very proud people. All the former presidents, you see how they've conducted themselves. Hopefully all the families in this community, not just the people that pray and are congregants in our shul, but all the families from their early years, from their memories of when this was the only synagogue in the community, should come here. They should look at the wall and they should say, we would love to have our family's name on this legacy.
This new concept of a legacy wall is just a new way for people to donate towards the synagogue. It's going to be a tremendous inspiration. I think it's a great thing for the synagogue.
I don't think 80 years ago anyone could have imagined what's happening right now in our Bet Knesset. The amount of learning, the amount of tefillot, all the different functions that go on, Hesed, Tzedakah. It would be impossible to have imagined that 80 years ago. We could only dream that the next 80 years will be as accomplished when we hold on to the last 80 years. When we learn from the people who started this, and we take from them their strength, their wisdom, and we make it work for the next 80 years.